All the money my father had poured into this wedding, the imported white roses flown in from Ecuador, the string quartet from Boston, the 5-tier cake that cost more than my first car, and the man I was supposed to marry didn't even have the decency to text me back. My millionaire boss leaned close enough that I could smell his cologne, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered the 6 words that would detonate my entire life. Just pretend I'm the groom, Claire. I was standing in the bridal suite of the Rosewood Estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, staring at my reflection in a gilded mirror that was older than my grandmother. The dress my mother had chosen for me, because of course she had chosen, it was a custom Monique Lhuillier, with enough beading to blind a small country. It had cost $42,000. My father had signed the check without blinking. That was the kind of family I came from, the kind where money solved problems, covered shame, and bought silence. The kind where the bride was the last person anyone actually asked. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 29 years old. I work as a senior marketing strategist for Hale & Morgan, a private equity firm based out of Manhattan. And 3 hours before this moment, I had been a woman about to marry Preston Callahan, the heir to the 3rd largest shipping logistics company on the East Coast. Preston and I had been together for 4 years. We had been engaged for 14 months. Our wedding had 300 guests waiting in a marble ballroom downstairs. Senators, hedge fund managers, my father's golf buddies, Preston's Yale friends, the cream of old Connecticut money, all of them sipping champagne, all of them waiting for the bride to walk down the aisle. There was just one small problem. The groom was gone. Claire, honey, you need to breathe. My maid of honor, my younger sister Vivian, was perched on the edge of the chaise lounge with her phone in her hand and a look on her face that told me she was about to say something I did not want to hear. He's still not picking up. None of his groomsmen are picking up either. Something happened. Something happened, I repeated, my voice sounding flat and far away, like it belonged to someone else. He probably got stuck somewhere. The traffic coming out of the city is insane on Saturdays. Vivian was lying. I could tell because her left eyebrow was doing that thing it did when we were kids and she had broken something and was trying to blame it on the dog. I'm sure he's on his way. Vivi, I turned from the mirror. It's been 3 hours. I know. He was supposed to be here at 1. It's 4. I know, Claire. His best man just told my father he has no idea where Preston is. I could feel my voice starting to shake, and I hated myself for it. His parents haven't seen him since last night. His phone is off. His assistant is off. His car is gone from the hotel valet. Vivian opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Maybe there's an explanation. Vivi. I sat down slowly on the stool in front of the vanity, and $42,000 worth of dress pooled around my ankles like spilled champagne. He's not coming. There was a long, ugly silence. And then there was a knock on the door. It was not Preston. It was my father. Gerard Whitmore, 71 years old, the kind of man who had built his commercial real estate empire from a single parking lot in Stamford and had not smiled in public since 1998. He stepped into the room, and I watched his face do something I had never seen it do before. I watched it crumble. "Claire Bear," he said softly, and my father had not called me Claire Bear since I was 7 years old. That was when I knew. That was when I actually, finally, knew. Dad. My voice was smaller than a bride's should ever be. What happened? He closed the door behind him. He sat down on the chaise next to Vivian. He took a slow breath, the kind a man takes when he is about to deliver news that he has spent the last hour rehearsing in his head. "I just got off the phone with Howard Callahan. Howard was Preston's father, and I'm going to tell you the truth because you deserve the truth. Preston is in the Bahamas. He flew out last night on his father's jet. He has been there since 2 in the morning. He is, as of this afternoon, with a woman named Madison Vance, who I believe is one of your husband-to-be's co-workers." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just sat there, on a velvet stool, in the most expensive dress I had ever worn, in a room full of flowers I had not picked, and I listened to my father tell me that the man I had planned to spend my life with had abandoned me without a text, without a call, without the basic human courtesy of a goodbye. "He's not coming, honey." "No," I said. "I guessed. He's asked his father to apologize to us. Howard is devastated. He's willing to cover every penny of the wedding costs. He's willing to make a public statement. He's willing to—" "Dad." I held up a hand. "Please." My father stopped. "There are 300 people in that ballroom. I know. There are reporters from town and country. I know. Everyone I have ever known in my entire life is sitting downstairs waiting for me to walk down an aisle, and I have to go tell them that the man I love has run off to the Bahamas with someone named Madison. Claire, we can handle this. We can tell them there's been an emergency. Can I have a minute, please? My voice cracked. Can I just have a minute alone? My father and my sister looked at each other. Then they both stood up, and they both came over, and they both kissed the top of my head, the way they used to when I was small, and they left me alone in a room full of orchids and the ghost of a wedding that was never going to happen. I stared at the mirror for a long time. I did not cry. I think some part of me was still waiting for the punchline. Some part of me was still waiting for Preston to walk through the door and laugh and tell me it was the worst prank in the history of the universe and please forgive him because he loved me, he loved me, he loved me. But the door didn't open. Well, not for him. When the door finally did open, about 20 minutes later, I did not even turn around. I assumed it was Vivian coming back to tell me that the guests were growing restless, that my father wanted to know how I wanted to handle the announcement, that we needed to cancel the caterer, that we needed to call the photographer, that we needed to cancel my entire life. I was told not to come up here, a voice said behind me. So naturally, I came up here. I turned. Standing in the doorway was my boss, Julian Hale, 41 years old, co-founder and chief executive of Hale & Morgan. The man I had worked directly under for the past 3 years. The man who had hired me at 26 when every other firm in Manhattan had told me I was too young and too inexperienced. The man who had approved my promotion twice. The man who had shown up to my engagement party last spring in a charcoal suit and a forced smile that I had been too love-struck to notice at the time. Julian. I blinked. What are you doing up here? Your father invited me to the wedding. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. I was sitting in the third row, and I couldn't help but notice that there has been no wedding. Yes. I let out a laugh that sounded like something breaking. Yes, I'm aware. Your sister is downstairs trying to keep 300 people from rioting. Your father is on the phone with his lawyer. Your mother is drinking what I believe is her 4th glass of champagne. That sounds about right. Claire. He crossed the room slowly. He was a tall man, lean, with dark hair just starting to gray at the temples, and eyes the color of weak tea. He had never once in 3 years touched me, not even a handshake that lasted too long. But now he stopped about 3 feet from me, and he did something I had never seen him do before. He looked nervous. Can I ask you a question? I'm really not in the mood for a staff meeting, Julian. This isn't a staff meeting. I looked up at him. Your father told me what Preston did. Julian's jaw tightened in a way that I had only ever seen in board meetings when he was about to fire someone. And I want to ask you something. And I want you to say yes or no. And I want you to know that there is no wrong answer. Do you want to get married today? I stared at him. What? Do you want to walk down that aisle today, in that dress, in front of those 300 people, and get married? Because if the answer is yes, I can make that happen. And if the answer is no, I will walk downstairs right now and I will tell every single one of them that you have the flu and that the wedding is canceled and that they can all go home. Julian. I shook my head. I don't understand what you're saying. He took one more step forward. His voice dropped. I'm saying I can stand in for him. I think my heart actually stopped. I'm saying that if you want to walk down that aisle, I will be waiting for you at the end of it. I'm saying that if you want to save face, I will give you the biggest save of your life. I'm saying that nobody in that ballroom has ever met Preston except his own family, and his own family is not here because they are all mortified and have already left. They left? They left 20 minutes ago, out the service entrance. He gave a small, grim smile. Apparently Howard Callahan is a coward too. It runs in the family. I couldn't speak. So. Julian cleared his throat. Nobody in that room has any idea what the groom looks like except the bridesmaids, who I assume are loyal to you, and the officiant, who I assume can be reasoned with. Your father and I have already spoken. He is on board with whatever you decide. This is your choice, Claire. Nobody else gets to make it, just you. Why? I said, and my voice was hoarse. Why would you do this? Julian looked at me for a long moment. Because, he said quietly, you deserve better than walking out of here with your head down. And something in the way he said it, some tiny splinter of something underneath the calm, professional voice made me look at him, really look at him. For the first time in 3 years, and I saw it. I'm not going to pretend I understood it all in that moment, but I saw something, Something that had been sitting underneath every late-night strategy session, every Monday morning coffee he had placed on my desk without being asked, every time he had introduced me to a client as the best marketing mind in the building. Something that had been there, waiting, for a long time. "Okay," I heard myself say. Julian's eyes widened a fraction. "Okay? Pretend you're the groom." The rest of that afternoon moved like a dream I was watching from the outside. My father brought in Father Michael, the officiant who had been hired for our wedding, and explained the situation. Father Michael, bless him, was a Jesuit who had seen a lot of things in 40 years of ministry, and he did not even raise an eyebrow. He did, however, make one phone call and explain that since the marriage license had been issued under Preston's name and would therefore be legally invalid if anyone else signed it, the ceremony we were about to perform would be, for legal purposes, purely symbolic. We could sign legal paperwork later, he said, if we wanted to make it real. His tone when he said if you want to make it real was gentle and not unkind, and a little bit amused. My sister Vivian, who was apparently the only person in my immediate family with a functional understanding of how to handle chaos, went downstairs and announced that due to a small delay, the ceremony would begin in 30 minutes, that the bride was fine, and that there had been a last-minute change that would be explained at the reception. She said this with the confidence of a 4-star general, and nobody questioned her. My mother, Catherine, was hustled into the kitchen and given a cup of coffee and told to please stop drinking. My father's best friend, a federal judge named Theodore Beaumont, quietly agreed to officiate the real ceremony in a small civil service the following week, if I wanted one. My father did not ask me whether I wanted one. He just set it up, because that is the kind of man my father is. And Julian Hale, my boss, the man I had worked with for 3 years and never once considered romantically, went down the hall to the groom's suite where his best man Preston had been scheduled to change, and he walked out 10 minutes later in Preston's abandoned tuxedo which, by some miracle or curse, fit him almost perfectly. He looked at me in the hallway before we went downstairs. "Last chance to call it off," he said. "Last chance to run away," I said back. And he smiled. A real one. The first real smile I had ever seen on his face. "I'm not going anywhere. I will remember the walk down that aisle for the rest of my life." The string quartet from Boston played Pachelbel's Canon in D. My father's arm was shaking slightly under mine, and I did not know if it was from nerves or rage or relief. The 300 guests stood when they saw me. Flashbulbs went off. Someone in the back gasped, because I did in fact look stunning, even I can admit that now. And at the end of the aisle, under an arch of white roses and baby's breath, stood a man who was not the man I was supposed to marry. Julian Hale watched me walk toward him with an expression I had never seen on any man's face in my entire life. Nobody in the crowd noticed the swap, not a single person. Preston's family had left. My extended family had only met Preston twice. My friends were too busy crying and taking pictures to look closely. And all of Preston's friends, the ones who might have noticed, had apparently been in on the Bahamas trip and had conveniently not shown up. Father Michael performed a beautiful, slightly modified ceremony. We said vows that were not legally binding but that Julian delivered with the kind of slow, certain voice a man uses when he means every word. I said mine in a daze. When Father Michael said, "You may kiss the bride," Julian leaned in and paused about 2 inches from my face, and he whispered, so softly that only I could hear, "Is this okay?" And I whispered, "Yes." He kissed me. It was not a performance. Reader, it was not a performance. The reception was a blur of congratulations and toasts, and a first dance that felt less like pretending and more like something I could not yet name. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, after my father had made a speech about family and resilience that made half the ballroom cry, Julian took my hand and pulled me out onto the terrace. The September air was cool. The lights from the estate glowed behind us. Somewhere inside, the DJ was playing Etta James. "I owe you an explanation," Julian said. I said carefully, "I would like an explanation." "Yes." He looked out at the dark garden. He was quiet for a long time. 3 years ago, he said finally, a woman walked into my office for a job interview. She was 26 years old, she had 3 years of agency experience, and she had put together a pitch deck for the interview that was better than anything my senior partners had produced in a decade. I hired her on the spot. I went home that night, and I told my brother over the phone that I had just met the smartest woman in New York. I said nothing. A year later, he continued, she came into my office to tell me she was engaged. I congratulated her. I took her and her fiancé to dinner at Daniel. I sent them a set of crystal wine glasses for their engagement party. I watched her walk out of my office holding a ring box, and I went home and I got drunk for the first time since I was 23 years old. Julien. I never said anything, Claire. I never wanted to be that man. You were happy, and I was your boss, and I had no right. So I said nothing. For 3 years, I said nothing. And I was going to keep saying nothing, for as long as it took, because your happiness mattered more to me than my feelings. But then I sat in that ballroom today, and I watched your father's face, and I thought about you upstairs, and I knew that if I let you walk out of that building with your head down, I would never, ever forgive myself. He turned to look at me. I am not asking you for anything, Claire. I am not asking you to choose me. I am not even asking you to sign the paperwork next week. I just needed you to know that what happened in there today was not a favor. It was not charity. It was the first completely honest thing I have done in 3 years. I looked at him. I looked at my boss. I looked at the man who had given me a job when I was 26, who had pushed for my promotion when I was 28, who had stood in for the groom when I was 29, who had apparently loved me the entire time and never said a word. Julien, I said. He waited. When you kissed me in there. Was that pretending? No, he said. That was the most real thing I have ever done. I reached up, I put my hand on his cheek, and I kissed him. Preston Callahan came back from the Bahamas 11 days later. He showed up at my apartment in the West Village on a Wednesday afternoon, apparently under the impression that I was going to welcome him home. He was tan. He was wearing a linen shirt. He had the audacity to have brought flowers. I opened the door. I looked at him. I laughed in his face. Claire, baby, let me explain. No, I stepped back. No, actually. Let me explain. What he did not know, because he had been too busy vacationing with Madison Vance to check the news, was that Judge Theodore Beaumont had indeed performed a quiet civil ceremony the previous Saturday in my father's library, with my family and Julian's brother as witnesses. The marriage was legally binding. The paperwork had been filed. There was a certificate in a drawer in my bedroom. My name was now Claire Hale. I explained all of this to Preston on my doorstep, slowly, in the same calm voice I used to give quarterly presentations at work. I watched his face go through 17 different colors, and when I was done, I took the flowers out of his hands, and I dropped them on the floor of the hallway, and I closed the door in his face. And then, because apparently this was a week of miracles, Preston's actual career imploded about 4 months later. It turned out that Madison Vance, the woman he had run off with, was not only his coworker but also the niece of a major investor in his father's company, and that investor did not appreciate being humiliated at a cocktail party in Palm Beach, where news of the affair had spread through the Connecticut social circuit like a grease fire. Preston was quietly let go from the family business. Howard Callahan stopped returning his calls. Last I heard, he was selling yacht insurance in Fort Lauderdale. I did not attend any of the drama. I had better things to do. Like spending a second honeymoon in Positano with my husband, because yes, we took one, and yes, it was wonderful, and yes, I cried the first night because I could not believe that a man could look at me the way Julian looked at me, and I had almost missed it entirely. Like adopting a rescue dog, a beagle mix named Otis, who ate one of Julian's Italian loafers within his first week in our home, and who Julian forgave instantly and without hesitation. Like watching Julian's mother, a ferocious 75-year-old woman from Charleston named Eleanor, pull me aside at our first Thanksgiving and tell me, with tears in her eyes, that she had been waiting 30 years for her son to bring home a woman who made him laugh like that. Like my sister Vivian getting engaged a year later to a kind doctor who actually showed up to things. Like my father, the unbreakable Gerard Whitmore, pulling Julian aside at the rehearsal dinner for our formal vow renewal on our 1-year anniversary and telling him, in a voice thick with emotion, that he had always known I had chosen the wrong man the first time and that he had never been happier to be right. Like finding out, on a cold December morning 2 years after that runaway wedding, that I was pregnant with twin girls, and watching Julian sit down on the bathroom floor of our apartment and cry, and telling him, as I sat down beside him, that it turned out the internet commenters who had wished twins on us in some parallel universe had gotten their wish after all. I think about that afternoon sometimes. The afternoon I stood in that bridal suite and waited for a man who was never going to come. I used to think it was the worst day of my life. Now I know it was the day my actual life began. Sometimes the people who leave us are not the tragedy we think they are. Sometimes they are the door closing, so that the right one can open. Sometimes the man who abandons you at an altar is not a villain. He is a clearing. He is making room. He is getting out of the way of someone who was already there, already waiting, already loving you the entire time, quietly, without demand, without price, without condition. I did not walk down the aisle toward the man I was supposed to marry. I walked down the aisle toward the man I was meant to. And his name is Julian Hale. And I am his wife. And that is the story of how I lost a fiancé and found a husband, all on the same afternoon, in a ballroom in Greenwich, Connecticut, surrounded by imported roses and 300 people who still think to this day that they attended the most beautiful wedding of the season. Which, come to think of it, they did.